He wasn't supposed to be the hero. They had counted on everyone underestimating the old canine, just like they had counted on lies burying the truth forever. But when the gun was raised and no one else dared move, it was Bear who charged through the smoke and chaos, ripping apart the plan they thought was flawless. Somewhere between the crash that shattered a quiet street and the courtroom that shook a city's soul, one dog changed everything. You might think you've seen loyalty before, but not like this. Stay with us, because this isn't just a story about corruption falling apart. It's about what happens when a heart that refuses to quit stands alone against the storm. If you're here now, it's for a reason. Like this story, if it stirred something in you, comment below with where you're watching from, and subscribe to stay with us as we keep telling the stories that deserve to be remembered. The early morning sun draped the town of Crestwood in a muted golden haze, stretching lazy beams over the cracked asphalt of Route 17. In this forgotten corner of the world, life moved slowly, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else, and the days bled into one another like pages of a faded book. The only sounds were the distant hum of cicadas and the occasional rumble of a motorcycle engine far off in the hills. At the heart of this sleepy community was Jessie Caldwell, a local firefighter known for her quiet smile and unwavering sense of duty. She walked down Main Street with a lightness in her step, a cup of steaming black coffee in hand. At her side trotted Bear, her retired canine partner, a broad-shouldered German shepherd with silver-tipped ears and a steady, knowing gaze. Bear had served 2 tours overseas before joining the town's tiny search and rescue team. Now, semi-retired, he accompanied Jessie everywhere, his movements slower but no less alert. Today was a town day, a day for errands and waving to Mrs. Connors sweeping her porch, a day for grabbing dog treats from Murphy's Market and returning overdue library books. Jessie relished these simple moments, their rhythm a comforting background hum after years of chaos and uncertainty. As Jessie sipped her coffee, a low growl rumbled from Bear's throat. She followed his gaze to a group of bikers pulling into the lot across the street. Their leather jackets gleamed under the sunlight, patches stitched with roaring skulls and coiled serpents. Jessie stiffened slightly but said nothing. Bikers came and went through Crestwood. Most were harmless, just rough around the edges. But there was something about these men, their too easy laughter. The way their leader, a tall man with a sun-creased face and mirrored sunglasses, scanned the street like a predator sizing up prey, that sent a prickle down her spine. Bear's ears pinned back, his muscles tensing as he watched the bikers dismount. Jessie gave a gentle tug on his leash, coaxing him forward. They passed by without incident, the bikers laughing and jostling each other as they headed into the diner. Still, Bear kept glancing back over his shoulder, uneasy. Jessie shook it off. You couldn't live life jumping in the shadows. She turned onto Willow Lane, a quieter side street lined with towering oaks, whose branches whispered secrets overhead. She didn't notice the battered Harley slipping into the street behind her, engine throttled low. Didn't notice the glint of something in the rider's hand. It wasn't until the screech of brakes and the sickening thud of impact shattered the air that she turned, spilling her coffee onto the sidewalk. Time slowed. She saw Bear thrown aside like a rag doll. She saw the motorcycle's front wheel twisted grotesquely as the rider tumbled over the handlebars. And she saw, crumpled against the curb, a figure in a black hoodie. Jessie ran, heart hammering against her ribs, Bear scrambling to his feet with a pained whimper. The biker lay motionless, a helmeted head tilted at an unnatural angle. Around them, people began to gather. Miss Connors, Mr. Patel from the grocery store, even Sheriff Dorsey, summoned by some sixth sense that something terrible had just happened. The rider groaned, stirring slightly. Jessie dropped to her knees beside him. Don't move, she said, hands already checking for broken bones. The helmet visor was opaque, hiding his face, but the tension in his body spoke volumes. He wasn't just hurt. He was calculating, deciding something. The sheriff crouched beside Jessie. What happened here? He asked, low and tense. The biker's hand fluttered weakly, pointing at Bear. Dog ran out. Couldn't see, he gasped. Murmurs rippled through the growing crowd. Jessie opened her mouth to protest. Bear had been at her side, leashed, the entire time, but the sheriff raised a hand, silencing her. We'll get a statement later, he said. Let's get him to the hospital first. Paramedics arrived, their sirens splitting the sleepy morning. Sorrows noticed something odd. His helmet wasn't a standard biker helmet. It was bulkier, heavier, almost military grade, and when they jostled him onto the gurney, something rattles inside. Bear let out a low, vibrating growl. Jesse squeezed his shoulder, trying to calm him, yet a gnawing unease had taken root inside her. Hours later, sitting at the small police station with Bear curled at her feet, Jesse replayed the scene over and over. Sheriff Dorsey sat across from her, a tape recorder whirring softly between them. "He says you lost control of your dog," the sheriff said, not unkindly. Jesse frowned. "Bear was at my side. You know him. He wouldn't bolt." Dorsey sighed. "I know, Jess, but we have to follow procedure." Jesse rubbed her temples. "There were people, witnesses, nobody saw anything," Dorsey said quietly. "Mrs. Connors said she looked up after hearing the crash. Patel said the same. Even the footage from the gas station across the street is always." The sheriff leaned back in his chair. "Look, it'll probably just go down as an unfortunate accident. No charges, no harm done." But harm had been done. Jesse felt it in the ache in her ribs, in the way Bear wouldn't settle, pacing the room restlessly. Something wasn't right. That night she sat on her porch, Bear pressed against her side, staring out into the darkness. Somewhere out there, past the safe ring of porch light, lay the truth. And Jesse Caldwell had never been the type to let a mystery go unanswered. In the distance, a motorcycle engine roared, then faded into the night. Bear growled low in his throat. Jesse set her jaw, determination hardening inside her. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. The following morning, a dense fog blanketed Crestwood, curling like ghostly fingers around the skeletal oaks lining Willow Lane. Jessie sat at her kitchen table, a cold cup of coffee untouched at her elbow, Bear lying rigidly at her feet, ears flickering with every creak and groan the old house made. Neither of them had slept. The image of the crash replayed in Jessie's mind like a broken reel, looping endlessly, every small detail gnawing at her gut with questions she couldn't answer. Bear had been leashed, under control, she was sure of it. So why had the biker accused them so confidently? Why had every witness suddenly become blind at the exact moment when 100 little things should have been noticed? Pulling on a hoodie and jeans, Jessie clipped Bear's leash, though he barely needed it, and headed for the station. She needed answers. Sheriff Dorsey met her at the door, rubbing sleep from his eyes, a styrofoam coffee cup crumpling slightly in his hand as he tightened his grip on it. "Jessie," he started, with voice lined with fatigue and something else reluctance. "Listen, we pulled the footage from McCarthy's gas station across the way. Thought it would give us a clean view of the crash." He paused, jaw tightening. Jessie leaned in, her pulse thudding in her ears. "And?" she prompted. Dorsey exhaled a long, slow breath. The camera was offline, corroded wires. Maintenance records show it hadn't been working for at least a week. Jessie stepped back as if slapped. "You're telling me that the only street camera facing that stretch of road was down the whole time?" she demanded, incredulous. Dorsey held up a placating hand. "It's not just that one. Town maintenance logs show half the cameras around Main Street have been glitching lately. Budget cuts. You know how it is." Jessie shook her head, a cold chill crawling up her spine. "Too convenient. Too coincidental." Bear growled softly at her side, an ominous vibration that seemed to set the entire conversation buzzing with tension. Ignoring Dorsey's cautious gaze, Jessie turned on her heel, Bear matching her stride as she pushed out the door into the fog. The scene of the accident remained taped off, a limp yellow ribbon fluttering feebly from a cracked lamppost. The twisted remnants of a stop sign lurch at a drunken angle, casting a jagged shadow on the sidewalk. Jessie let Bear off leash, trusting his instincts far more than her own battered sense of logic right now. Instantly, Bear's demeanor changed. His ears pinned back, nose low to the ground, tail stiff. He began circling the impact site with urgent, deliberate movements. Jessie watched, heart hammering. Something was wrong. Bear never behaved like this without reason. He paused near the spot where the biker had fallen, sniffing hard at the cracked concrete, then scratched violently at the ground, barking once, a sharp, demanding sound that made Jessie jump. "What is it, boy?" she murmured, crouching beside him. He scratched again, more frantically this time, as if trying to dig something out from beneath the thin veneer of asphalt and dust. Jessie scanned the area but saw nothing out of place. No evidence bagged and flagged by the sheriff's deputies. No visible bloodstains. Nothing but the yawning void of missing context. Bear barked again, louder, then darted toward a nearby storm drain, his body low, muscles rippling beneath his thick coat. Jessie chased after him, her boots slipping on the damp concrete. Bear pawed at the drain cover, whining now, frustrated. Jessie knelt down, peering through the iron slats. A faint glint caught her eye, something metallic, wedged between the bars. Heart racing, she reached through, her fingertips brushing cold metal. It took several minutes of awkward fumbling, but finally she pulled it free. A small, battered camera no larger than a pack of gum, its casing cracked but mostly intact. Shock rooted her to the spot. A body cam? No, too small. Maybe a helmet cam? She turned it over in her hands, noting a faint logo. Vanguard Optics, a brand favored by tactical units and extreme sports enthusiasts alike. Her mind worried. The biker's unusual helmet. The strange weight he'd noticed when he was lifted onto the gurney. Was this what he had been hiding? Bear nudged her elbow, whining urgently, drawing her attention back to the scene. Jessie rose, pocketing the camera, and scanned the area again. A deeper sense of wrongness had settled in her bones now, a creeping certainty that the crash had been no accident. Turning to the curb where she had spilled her coffee yesterday, she noticed something she had missed before. Faint skid marks, shallow but visible if you knew what to look for, leading not from the center of the street as expected, but from the far shoulder, angled deliberately toward the sidewalk. A targeting maneuver. She looked down at Bear, whose golden eyes met hers, steady and grim. "He aimed for us," she whispered, the words tasting like rust on her tongue. Back at her truck, Jessie tucked the camera carefully into the glove compartment. No way was she handing it over, yet not until she knew what was on it. Bear settled into the passenger seat, ears still flickering, body coiled tight like a spring. She started the engine, the rumble cutting through the oppressive fog. Thoughts churned in her head, dark and tangled. Why would someone target her? She was no one special. A firefighter in a sleepy town, a woman with no enemies she could name. Unless it wasn't about her at all. She thought of Bear, of his past, of the missions overseas no one spoke about in polite company. Missions that left ghosts in their wake. The road blurred under her tires as she drove home, every shadow twisting into something menacing. She would need help, someone who knew more about surveillance tech. Someone. Problem was, in a town like Crestwood, trust was a currency in short supply. Jessie pulled into her driveway just as her phone buzzed. A number she didn't recognize flashed across the screen. Hesitating for only a second, she answered. "Hello?" Static crackled on the line, then a low voice, distorted but urgent. "You have something that doesn't belong to you. Return it, and no one else gets hurt." Jessie's blood turned to ice. She opened her mouth to respond, but the line went dead. Beside her, Bear growled low and deadly, staring at the darkened tree line across the street. Jessie tightened her grip on the steering wheel, adrenaline surging through her veins. She wasn't imagining it. This was real, and it was only just beginning. Jessie didn't sleep that night, instead pacing the length of her porch with Bear trailing closely behind, the camera hidden inside a hollowed-out book in her living room. The voice on the phone had shattered any lingering doubt she had. Whatever this was, it wasn't random, and whoever was behind it wasn't planning on letting it go. As the first bruises of dawn painted the horizon, Jessie knew she couldn't wait any longer. She had to go back to the scene again, this time with sharper eyes and a mind ready for whatever truth lay buried beneath the wreckage. She clipped Bear's leash and drove the short distance back to Willow Lane, parking just out of sight. The mist had lifted, but the air remained heavy, sticky against her skin, as if the town itself resisted exposing its secrets. The yellow police tape still fluttered around the accident site, limp, and Jessie ducked under it, heart thudding. Bear led the way, his nose to the ground, moving faster, more urgently than yesterday. His entire body vibrated with tension, instincts sharpened to a razor's edge. Jessie followed him past the skid marks and the battered stop sign, around the cracked curb where the impact had occurred, and into the bushes lining the street, trampled from yesterday's chaos. Bear stopped abruptly, ears pricked forward, tail stiff. He began pawing frantically at a dense patch of brambles, whining with frustration. Jessie dropped to her knees beside him, pushing aside the thorny branches. Her fingers brushed something soft and foreign buried beneath the leaves. A torn scrap of dark cloth, sticky with half-dried blood. Carefully, she extracted it, her gloved hands trembling slightly. The fabric felt heavy, military-grade, like the kind used in tactical vests. The blood smeared across it was fresh enough that it hadn't fully blackened, a deep crimson staining the fibers. Jessie's mind raced. It wasn't her blood, she hadn't been injured badly enough. And the biker, his crash wounds had been superficial. The medics had said so themselves. So whose blood was this? Bear growled again, snapping her attention back to the present. He darted toward the tree line, sniffing and scratching furiously at something half-buried beneath a fallen branch. Jessie followed, her boots crunching over damp gravel. As she neared, she saw a helmet, battered and scuffed, lying in a shallow ditch hidden by weeds. She crouched, prying it loose. It wasn't the biker's helmet. The color was wrong, matte black with deep scratches running across the surface, like claw marks. There were no gang insignias or patches, only a strange, almost unnoticeable emblem stamped near the chin guard, a triangular symbol with interlocking gears inside. Jessie turned the helmet over in her hands. The inside padding was torn, and more blood spotted the edges. Droplets dried into dark maroon patches. Whoever had worn this had been injured badly. She stood, scanning the surroundings. There was no trail, no sign of anyone crawling away from the scene, no footprints leading into the woods. The realization hit her like a blow. Someone else had been there when the crash happened. Someone injured enough to lose blood but still able to disappear into the night. Bear barked sharply, tail straight like an arrow. Jessie tensed. A rustling sound emerged from deeper in the woods, low and stealthy, like someone or something trying to stay hidden. She strained her ears, but the sound vanished as quickly as it came, swallowed by the morning stillness. Hugging the helmet close, she hurried back toward the truck, her mind spinning. She couldn't bring this to Dorsey, not yet. She needed help, someone who could analyze the blood, trace the helmet, connect the pieces without tipping off whoever was watching her. As she reached her vehicle, she noticed muddy footprints near her rear bumper, too small to be her own, too fresh to ignore. Jessie's throat tightened. They were being watched, had been for some time now. She bundled Bear into the passenger seat and peeled away from the curb, gravel spraying behind her. She headed not toward home but to the one place she thought she could work undisturbed, the abandoned firehouse on the edge of town, shuttered last year after the county's budget cuts. Jessie still had keys. Within minutes, she pulled into the cracked lot, weeds sprouting through the concrete like veins. She killed the engine, listening. Nothing but the soft whine of insects and the distant whir of a single streetlight struggling against the dawn. Bear hopped out first, nose high, body taut, his hackles raised. Jessie hurried after him, unlocking the side door and slipping inside the cool, musty darkness. Dust motes swirled in the shafts of light slicing through boarded-up windows. The air smelled of engine grease and forgotten days. Inside the captain's office, Jessie spread the bloodied cloth and helmet across the scarred wooden desk. Bear sat beside her, eyes locked on the door. She pulled out her phone, taking detailed photos of both items, uploading them to a secure cloud account she'd set up years ago after her first messy deployment. Next, she pried open an old first aid cabinet, rooting through the supplies until she found a test kit, primitive but functional, that could at least confirm whether the blood was human. 10 agonizing minutes later, the test strip darkened, confirming her fears. This wasn't animal blood. Someone human had been hurt, badly, at that crash site. But who? And why had they fled instead of calling for help? Jessie's thoughts kept looping back to the helmet's insignia. She snapped a close-up photo and ran a reverse image search. It took several tries, but finally a match flickered onto her screen. An obscure private security firm called ArcLight Solutions, known for their off-the-books operations overseas. Mercenaries, basically. She skimmed through the few public records available, her stomach knotting tighter with each new line. ArcLight operatives had been implicated in smuggling rings, covert black ops, and even assassination plots, though nothing had ever been proven. Their motto flashed at the bottom of the page: invisible, irrefutable, irreplaceable. Jessie leaned back, the weight of the information pressing down on her chest. This wasn't some random accident. This was professional, tactical. Whoever had crashed into her wasn't just an unlucky biker, and whoever had lost that helmet was someone even more dangerous. Bear growled again, deep and warning. Jessie froze, ears straining. A faint scraping sound came from outside the office, soft but deliberate, like rubber soles sliding cautiously across the linoleum. She killed the phone screen and tucked it into her back pocket. Bear crouched low, ready to strike. Jessie's hand closed around a heavy wrench lying on the floor. The scraping stopped. For a heartbeat, the building was silent except for the twin thunder of her heartbeat and Bear's low growl. Then a shadow passed outside the frosted glass window of the captain's office door. A silhouette, human but wrong, the proportions too stiff, too calculated. Jessie tightened her grip on the wrench as the doorknob began to turn slowly, carefully, as if whoever was on the other side wanted to make sure they caught her alone and unprepared. The doorknob twisted slightly, sending a metallic squeal echoing through the abandoned firehouse. But before Jessie could react, Bear lunged forward with a snarl that tore through the silence like a blade, his body a blur of coiled muscle and fury. The shadow outside the glass jerked back instinctively, heavy footsteps pounding away into the corridor beyond. Jessie sprang after Bear, heart hammering, wrench gripped, white-knuckled in her hand. But by the time she rounded the corner, the hallway was empty, the only sign of the intruder a faint scuff mark trailing toward the rear exit. Bear sniffed frantically, tail stiff hackles, erased as he darted toward the broken door, swinging lazily in the morning breeze. Jessie hesitated for a fraction of a second, then followed, adrenaline flooding her veins, the helmet and bloody cloth forgotten behind them on the captain's desk. Outside, the firehouse grounds stretched barren and cracked, but Bear didn't pause. He veered sharply left, nose to the ground, pulling Jessie along behind him with surprising strength. The trail led through the scrub brush and abandoned service roads, weaving a chaotic path deeper into the outskirts of town, far from any place Jessie normally ventured. It felt wrong in the way forgotten places always did, as if the earth itself remembered what had been hidden and broken here. After nearly a mile, Bear stopped abruptly, pawing at a cluster of overgrown weeds at the base of a rusted chain-link fence. Jessie pushed aside the brambles and saw it a discarded jacket, dark denim stained with something darker than dirt, the sleeves torn and the inside lining slashed open as if someone had been searching for something hidden within. Bear growled, low and guttural, his nose hovering over the torn fabric. Jessie pulled a pair of gloves from her pocket and carefully turned the jacket inside out. A small plastic tag fluttered loose from the lining, catching the light. Crestwood Police Department evidence storage. Her breath caught. This wasn't just some random piece of trash. This jacket had been logged, sealed, and at some point it had been stolen. But from where and by whom? As Jessie tucked the tag into her pocket, the faint crackle of a radio pierced the silence. She whirled, scanning the tree line, but saw no one. Bear's ears flicked, tracking the sound with sharp precision. Without warning, he bolted to the right, straining against the leash. Jessie stumbled after him, nearly losing her balance as he barreled down a slope toward a dried-out creek bed. Nose low, tail high, they slid to a halt at the base of an old concrete drainage pipe, half choked with debris. Bear barked once, then started digging at the loose gravel with frantic urgency. Jessie dropped to her knees, heart pounding as she clawed at the rocks alongside him. Minutes later, her fingers brushed cold metal. She pulled free a dented lockbox no bigger than a lunch pail, its hinges crusted with rust but its clasp still sealed tight with a heavy-duty padlock. Jessie sat back on her heels, chest heaving. Whatever was inside this box had been hidden for a reason, and that reason likely tied directly into the crash, the missing helmet, the blood-stained fabric, and the shadowy threats that had started haunting her since yesterday. She tucked the box into her backpack and rose, Bear still whining softly at her side. As she turned to climb back up the slope, the distant growl of engines reached her ears. Multiple engines coming fast. Bear stiffened, snarling under his breath. Jessie didn't wait to see who was coming. She sprinted toward the truck, Bear matching her stride for stride, lungs burning as the roar of motorcycles grew louder behind them. Back at the firehouse, Jessie secured the door and wedged a chair under the knob for good measure. She needed help, and there was only one person she trusted enough to call. She punched in the number and waited, bouncing anxiously on the balls of her feet. After 3 rings, a familiar voice answered. Officer Clara Reyes, her old academy partner, now working special investigations in Crestwood's sister town, Millstone. Jess? Clara sounded surprised but alert. Jesse wasted no time. I need you. Bring your kit. And come alone. There was a pause, then Clara's voice sharpened. Are you in trouble? Jesse hesitated. Maybe. Probably, just hurry. She hung up before Clara could ask more questions. 30 minutes later, Clara pulled into the firehouse lot in an unmarked cruiser, stepping out with a wary look and a battered duffel bag slung over her shoulder. Her dark hair was pulled into a no-nonsense ponytail, and her brown eyes flicked around the abandoned lot before settling on Jesse. Talk to me, she said without preamble. Jesse didn't waste time. She showed Clara the helmet, the bloody fabric, the stolen jacket, and finally the battered lockbox. Clara's expression darkened with every new revelation. This is big, she muttered, running a hand through her hair. Bigger than just some rogue biker. She paused, frowning. You said the crash victim blamed Bear? Jesse nodded grimly. And now I'm being stalked. Clara's jaw tightened. Then we don't have much time. They set up a makeshift lab in the captain's office, Clara unpacking a forensic kit from her duffel. As she worked, Jesse filled her in on the strange helmet insignia and what little she had uncovered about Arclight Solutions. Clara's brow furrowed deeper with each passing minute. If these guys are involved, you're poking a hornet's nest, she warned. Jesse shrugged, weariness weighing her down, too late for second thoughts. An hour later, Clara glanced up from the laptop she had connected to a portable scanner. You're gonna want to see this, she said grimly. She turned the screen toward Jesse, displaying a grainy black and white photo of a man in biker leathers, smirking as he leaned against a Harley outside a gas station. Jesse leaned closer, heart sinking. It was the biker from the crash. The caption beneath the photo read, Subject of interest in Millstone hit-and-run fatality. Case closed for insufficient evidence. Jesse's stomach twisted. He killed someone, she whispered. Clara nodded. A teenager hit and run, witnesses disappeared, evidence got lost. No one could make anything stick. She scrolled down, revealing a list of other incidents, all involving accidents. All suspicious, all unresolved. Jesse's blood ran cold. This wasn't a first offense. This was a pattern. And now, somehow, she had landed squarely in his crosshairs. Bear whined softly, pressing against Jesse's side. She ran her fingers through his fur, grounding herself. If the biker was part of something bigger, if he had help, if Arclight Solutions was even loosely connected to any of this, then Jesse was up against a force much larger and much deadlier than she had imagined. Clara snapped the laptop shut, eyes burning with resolve. We have to move, now. Jesse grabbed the lockbox and slung her bag over her shoulder. Bear already on his feet, alert and ready. They headed for the rear exit of the firehouse, just as a dark SUV pulled silently into the lot, its windows tinted so black they seemed to swallow the light. Jesse yanked Clara back just as the dark SUV's door cracked open. A thick-shouldered man stepping out with the predatory grace of someone who had done this far too many times before. The gleam of a weapon tucked under his jacket flashing briefly as he scanned the lot. Bear stiffened beside Jesse, low growls rumbling deep in his chest, his body a taut line of potential violence. Clara pulled her sidearm silently from its holster and jerked her head toward the rear of the firehouse. The unblocked access road, their only chance. Jesse clutched the lockbox tighter against her chest and nodded once, heart hammering a brutal rhythm against her ribs. They bolted through the back door, Bear leading, Jesse and Clara pounding after him, the SUV revving angrily behind them as the man inside realized his quarry was slipping through her. Gravel and weeds clawed at Jesse's boots as they sprinted into the thick woods beyond the firehouse, the canopy swallowing them whole, the sounds of town life fading into a heavy, oppressive silence. After what felt like an endless stretch of adrenaline-soaked minutes, they finally collapsed in a tangle of fallen branches near the edge of an old maintenance road, gasping for breath. Clara wiped sweat from her brow and glanced at Jesse, her expression grim. We need to figure out what's on that damn camera, she said between panting breaths. Jesse nodded, pulling the battered lockbox into her lap and struggling with the rusted latch. After several agonizing tries, the lock snapped open with a metallic shriek, revealing a tangle of wires, memory cards, and a small black body cam tucked in the corner like a secret waiting to be revealed. Clara whistled low. "Jackpot," she said. Jessie wasted no time extracting the device, its casing scarred but intact. She flipped it over, finding a tiny power button, and pressing it with trembling fingers. The camera blinked to life, a small grainy display flashing across the cracked screen. Clara connected it to her portable laptop with a makeshift adapter and pulled up the file directory. "There's a recording," she said, excitement flickering in her voice. Jessie leaned in, Bear sitting rigidly at their feet. Clara double-clicked the file. Nothing happened. Frowning, she tried another way to open it, but the computer spat back the same error message. "File not found." Jessie cursed under her breath, fists clenching. Clara bit her lip, navigating deeper into the file structure. "The memory's intact," she muttered. "But the video, it's been wiped, deliberately. Someone used a secure delete protocol for government grad stuff. This wasn't an accident." Jessie slumped back against the tree trunk, frustration gnawing at her insides. They had risked everything for this, and now it was gone, erased by whoever was orchestrating this twisted game. Bear let out a low whine, sensing her turmoil. Clara closed the laptop with a sharp click. "Maybe we can recover fragments," she said, but her tone was doubtful. Jessie scrubbed a hand over her face. They needed something, anything, to fight back with, and right now, all they had were broken pieces and unanswered questions. Bear suddenly stood, ears pricking forward, body tense. Jessie followed his gaze toward a battered wooden structure half hidden among the trees. An old storage shed, probably left from when the firehouse was still active. Without waiting, Bear trotted toward it, tail stiff, nose twitching furiously. Jessie exchanged a look with Clara, who nodded grimly, and they hurried after him, weaving through the underbrush. The shed's door hung crookedly on its hinges, creaking softly in the breeze. Inside, dust motes danced in slants of weak sunlight piecing the warped boards. Old firefighter gear, broken furniture, and random junk cluttered the small space. Bear zeroed in on a pile of debris near the back: old helmets, turnout coats, rusted oxygen tanks. He sniffed intently, then began pawing at the heap, barking sharply. Jessie's pulse kicked up. She rushed forward, kneeling beside him, and started tossing aside the junk, dust choking the air. Her fingers brushed something smooth and curved buried beneath a tattered turnout jacket. Another helmet, different from the one they had found before. This one scuffed and smeared with what looked suspiciously like dried blood. Jessie pulled it free, heart hammering. Clara knelt beside her, studying it with narrowed eyes. "That's the bikers," she said, recognition flashing in her gaze. Jessie turned the helmet over, frowning. Something about it seemed off. It was heavier than it should have been, and when she tapped the lining it made a faint hollow thud, like there was a hidden compartment inside. Bear barked again, pawing at the helmet with sudden urgency. Jessie's hands moved instinctively, feeling along the seams until she found it, a thin slit running along the interior padding. Almost invisible to the... She dug her fingers in and pried it open, heart pounding against her ribs. Inside the cavity was a microcamera, no bigger than a fingernail, wired into a makeshift battery pack. Jessie's breath caught. Clara leaned closer, her eyes widening. "Holy hell," she whispered. "They had a backup." Jessie pulled the microcamera free, cradling it carefully. It was scuffed but intact, the recording light still faintly blinking. "This could have everything," she said hoarsely, barely daring to hope. Clara opened her duffel and retrieved a portable reader, connecting the microcamera with steady hands. As soon as the device powered on, a series of encrypted files appeared on the screen, untouched, uncorrupted. Jessie felt a surge of fierce, raw hope rising in her chest. This was it. This was the leverage they needed. The proof that would unravel whatever web had been spun around them. Clara's fingers danced across the keyboard, initiating a cautious decryption sequence. Lines of code scrolled past in a blur, tension thickening the air with every passing second. Bear pressed close to Jessie's side, his warmth grounding her as she waited, barely breathing, for the results. The decryption progress bar crawled painfully slow across the screen, each percentage point another jagged heartbeat. Clara wiped sweat from her brow, muttering under her breath, "Come on, come on." At 78% decrypted, a sudden burst of static erupted from the laptop speakers, making both women flinch. Then a distorted video feed blinked into existence, a choppy, shaky view from the biker's perspective, showing the empty streets of Crestwood, the peaceful houses blurring past as he raced toward something or someone with grim purpose. Jessie leaned in, heart pounding so hard it blurred her vision. The video crackled, then settled into a clearer frame. Jessie herself walking bare down Willow Lane, unaware of the danger bearing down upon her like a loaded gun. Jessie gripped the edge of the desk so tightly her knuckles whitened, her heart thundering against her ribs as the video played in halting, jittery frames, each second carving deeper into her gut with a cold, merciless blade. Bear pressed against her side, ears pinned back, low growls rumbling deep in his chest. The footage showed her from the biker's helmet camera, a distorted angle but unmistakable. Herself and Bear walking peacefully along Willow Lane, the sun casting dappled light across the cracked sidewalk, everything so normal, so unsuspecting. Then, without warning, the biker gunned his engine, the frame tilting wildly as the machine surged forward, the speedometer blinking furiously on the corner of the screen, climbing rapidly. Jessie flinched instinctively, even though it was just a recording, her stomach twisting into knots as she watched the motorcycle veer directly toward her and Bear. No hesitation, no attempt to swerve or brake, just cold, calculated acceleration. Clara swore under her breath, leaning closer to the screen, her face grim. "It wasn't an accident," she said hoarsely, voicing the confirmation Jessie already felt deep in her bones. The impact came, brutal and sudden, the screen going black for a moment as the biker tumbled over his handlebars, the camera spinning wildly across the asphalt before stabilizing again, now pointing crookedly toward the chaos he had left behind. In the background, Jessie could be seen sprinting toward Bear, the sound distorted but clear enough to catch the panic in her voice, the confusion and terror. But the video didn't end there. As Jessie and Bear disappeared out of frame, another figure entered, a second biker, stepping calmly out from the tree line beyond the street, his face obscured by a tinted visor, his body language eerily composed. He bent over the fallen biker, speaking in low tones that the helmet mic barely caught. Clara quickly boosted the audio, and words emerged from the static like poison darts. "Stay down," the second biker instructed, his voice cold and clipped. "Remember, the dog attacked. You lost control. We stick to the story. Insurance will cover everything once the suit's filed. Boss says it's clean if no one talks." Jessie recoiled from the screen as if it had burned her, bile rising in her throat. Insurance fraud. They had staged the entire thing, using her and Bear as unwilling pawns, manufacturing an accident to collect a payout and pin the blame on her dog. Clara's face was a mask of fury, her hands tightening into fists at her sides. "These sons of bitches," she spat. "They plan to ruin your life for a paycheck." Jessie ran trembling fingers through her hair, the weight of it all pressing down on her shoulders until she thought she might collapse under it. Bear whined softly, sensing her distress, nudging her thigh with his nose, grounding her with his solid, unwavering presence. She dropped to one knee, burying her fingers in his thick fur, drawing strength from his steady heartbeat. "They were going to kill us," she whispered, realizing crashing over her in a suffocating wave. If Bear hadn't reacted, if the crash had been worse, they wouldn't have cared. Clara crouched beside her, fierce and steady. "We have evidence now," she said. "We can go to Dorsey. This changes everything." Jessie hesitated, doubt gnawing at her gut. Dorsey had been her mentor once, someone she had admired. But lately, there had been signs, the way he had waved off her concerns, the casual dismissal of missing evidence, the insistence that there was nothing suspicious despite every instinct screaming otherwise. Could she trust him? Or was he tangled up in this web too before she could voice her fears? Bear growled low and deep, his body spit, and Clara sprang to her feet, weapon drawn, Jessie right behind her, adrenaline surging anew. Outside the firehouse, the low rumble of motorcycles echoed off the empty lot, growing louder with every heartbeat. Jessie darted to the boarded-up window, peeking through a crack in the wood. 3 bikes idled in the lot now, their riders scanning the building with predatory patience, black helmets gleaming under the harsh midday sun. Clara cursed under her breath. "They found us," she said. "We need to move." Jessie nodded, heart hammering. She stuffed the microcamera and Clara's laptop into her backpack, slinging it over her shoulder with trembling hands. Bear stayed close, body tense, ready. They slipped out the back again, skirting the edge of the woods, using the thick underbrush for cover as they moved fast and low, the motorcycles revving angrily behind them as the riders realized their prey was slipping through their fingers once more. They didn't speak as they ran, every breath a struggle against the burning in their lungs, every step pounding the urgency of survival into their bones. Jessie's mind raced alongside her body, plotting next moves, calculating risks. They couldn't just run forever. They needed backup. They needed a safe place to regroup and a way to get themselves killed. As they neared the edge of town, Jessie spotted a familiar rusting billboard half buried in weeds. The turnoff to the old train depot, abandoned since the early 2000s. The depot loomed up ahead, a hulking skeleton of metal and broken windows. Its once bustling platforms now home to graffiti and decay. They slipped inside through a gap in the chain-link fence, ducking into the shadowed interior just as the motorcycles roared past on the road beyond, their riders oblivious to the hiding place mere feet away. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of rust and dust, the vast cavernous space echoing every tiny sound. Jessie sagged against a support beam, gasping for air. Bear pressed tightly against her side. Clara checked her weapon, reloading quickly and efficiently. "We can't stay long," she said. "Once they realize we're not on the road, they'll double back." Jessie nodded, swallowing down her fear. "We need a plan," she said. "Fast." Bear's ears twitched, and he moved deeper into the shadows, nose working furiously. Jessie followed, curious despite herself. In a far corner of the depot, hidden behind a stack of rotting pallets, Bear found something, another trail, faint but real, a whisper of scent that made him bark softly and paw at the ground. Jessie dropped to her knees, clearing away the debris. Beneath the pallets, she found a small metal hatch, rusted shut but not completely immovable. She and Clara exchanged a look, then pried it open together, revealing a dark, narrow tunnel leading downward into the earth. Bear peered into the hole, tail wagging slowly, alert but not fearful. Jessie looked at Clara, who gave a grim nod. "Underground tunnels," she said, "left over from when this was a shipping hub. They could run for miles." Jessie took a deep breath, the weight of the micro-camera heavy in her backpack, the knowledge of what they had discovered heavier still. Without another word, she swung her legs over the edge of the hatch and disappeared into the darkness below. Bear and Clara close. The tunnel swallowed them whole, a choking void of damp concrete and stale air. The only sounds, their ragged breathing and the occasional scuff of boots against crumbling floors. Jessie leading the way with Bear padding silently at her side, Clara bringing up the rear, her sidearm held in a two-handed grip. They moved fast but cautiously, adrenaline sharpening their senses, every shadow a potential threat. The narrow passage twisted and forked multiple times, a maze meant to confuse and trap, but Bear seemed sure of himself, his nose twitching as he tracked a scent only he could perceive. After what felt like an eternity of crawling through the gloom, they emerged into a wider maintenance tunnel, old pipes lining the walls, leaking condensation that dripped onto their heads. Jessie wiped her forehead, peering into the darkness ahead, her mind racing with the implications of what they had uncovered. The evidence in her backpack could blow apart not just the insurance scam, but something far more sinister, something that reached into places she hadn't even considered yet. Clara tapped Jessie's shoulder and pointed to a rusted metal ladder leading upward toward a sliver of light. They climbed quickly, Bear scrambling up first with surprising agility. Jessie pushed open the hatch at the top and emerged into another abandoned warehouse, this one larger, the skeletal remains of an old freight operation visible in the shafts of sunlight cutting through broken windows. It was marginally safer than the depot, but not by much. Jessie ducked behind a stack of collapsed crates and pulled out the microcamera, connecting it again to Clara's laptop, needing to be sure she hadn't hallucinated what she saw earlier. Clara powered up the device and queued up the incriminating footage again, scrubbing forward through the chaos after the crash. Jessie squinted at the screen, heart hammering as the second biker stepped into frame once more, speaking low and hurried to the injured man on the ground. Clara froze, her face going pale. She zoomed in on the second biker's neck where a fragment of his scarf had slipped during the conversation, revealing a flash of a badge clipped to his belt. Not a gang patch, not a biker emblem or an official law enforcement badge. Clara enhanced the image, sharpening the numbers and letters barely visible in the blurry footage. Jesse's blood turned to ice. It wasn't just any badge, it was a Crestwood Police Department badge, and the ID number stamped on it belonged to none other than Lieutenant Greg Harrell, the lead investigator assigned to Jesse's case, the man who had insisted Bear must have bolted, who had urged Jesse to let it go, who had controlled every piece of evidence from the start. For a long moment, neither woman spoke, the enormity of the betrayal hanging between them like a noose. Jesse's vision tunneled, rage and disbelief crashing through her in dizzying waves. Harrow hadn't just mishandled the case. He had been part of it from the beginning, orchestrating the cover-up, manipulating witnesses, ensuring no footage surfaced, all while pretending to be her advocate. Clara slammed her fist into the floor, her face a mask of fury. "The bastard set you up," she hissed. He knew exactly what he was doing. Jesse's hands trembled as she packed the laptop away, every instinct screaming that they needed to get out, to move, before Harrow realized his carefully woven lies were unraveling. Bear's ears pricked forward, his body going rigid. Jesse followed his gaze toward the far end of the warehouse, where a faint metallic clatter echoed through the vast emptiness. Clara scrambled to her feet, weapon drawn, and Jesse wasn't far behind. They edged toward the nearest exit, Bear herding them expertly, every muscle in his body vibrating with tension. They had almost made it to the door when the crack of gunfire shattered the stillness, bullets slicing through the air inches from Jesse's head. She ducked instinctively, heart slamming into her throat, Clara firing back with quick, controlled bursts. Shadows moved in the periphery, multiple attackers closing in, professional, precise. Jesse realized with a sick twist in her gut that they weren't just trying to scare them. They were here to finish it. Harrell knew. Somehow he had found out about the camera, about the surviving footage, and now he was cleaning house before it could come to light. They sprinted through the maze of crates, Bear darting ahead, leading them toward the loading dock at the rear of the building. More shots rang out, splintering wood and rescuing off rusted beams. Jessie gritted her teeth, pushing herself harder, lungs burning, muscles screaming. At the dock, an old delivery truck sat abandoned, its back doors yawning open like a desperate invitation. Jessie didn't hesitate. She threw herself inside, Clara and Bear piling in after her. She slammed the doors shut just as bullets peppered the metal exterior, the impacts deafening in the confined space. Clara jammed a metal bar through the handles to hold the doors shut temporarily. "It won't hold them long," she warned, breathing hard. Jessie nodded, mind racing. They needed another way out, another move that Harold couldn't anticipate. Bear barked sharply, pawing at a loose panel near the front of the truck. Jessie yanked it free, revealing a crawlspace leading under the chassis. She didn't think, she just acted, shoving the backpack through first. She slid after it, grimacing as rust and grime coated her skin. Clara followed, Bear wriggling through with surprising ease. They dropped onto the cracked asphalt beneath the truck, staying low, using the vehicle's bulk as cover. Jessie peeked around a tire, spotting Harrow himself stepping into view, gun in hand, his face a twisted mask of frustration and cold calculation. Jessie's heart stuttered. Harrow wasn't even trying to hide anymore. His betrayal was complete, his loyalty sold to whoever paid him more than his badge was worth. He barked orders to the other bikers, his voice carrying across the lot. "Find the girl, find the dog, find the damn camera. I want them gone tonight." Jessie felt Clara's hand squeeze her shoulder briefly, a silent vow of solidarity. They couldn't stay hidden forever. They needed a plan. Fast. Something that could turn the tables before Harrow boxed them in completely. She racked her brain, searching for options, and then an idea sparked, a reckless, dangerous idea. But maybe their only shot. She nudged Bear, whispering low into his ear. He listened, ears flicking, then crouched lower, ready. Clara met her gaze, understanding flashing between them. Jessie nodded once, steeling herself, and on her signal Bear sprang into motion, a blur of fur and fury, darting out from under the truck and drawing the bikers' attention with feral snarls and barking. The bikers shouted, scattering momentarily, guns. Jessie and Clara moved as one, breaking cover and sprinting toward a side alley lined with rusting dumpsters, their only hope of escape. Bullets slammed into the asphalt behind them, a chorus of destruction they barely outran. As they reached the alley's mouth, Jessie's phone buzzed violently in her pocket. She fumbled it out, heart still pounding. An unknown number flashed across the screen, the message simple and chilling. "We know where you're going. You can't outrun this." Jessie looked up, fear twisting into cold resolve. Ahead, the alley split into two paths, one leading back toward town, the other deeper into Crestwood's forgotten industrial wasteland. Without hesitation, she chose the darker road. The alley's darkness wrapped around them like a living thing as Jessie, Clara, and Bear pushed deeper into the industrial ruins on the outskirts of Crestwood. Their lungs burning, adrenaline keeping their legs moving even as exhaustion clawed at their bodies. Jessie clutching the backpack with the microcamera against her chest like it was the last beating heart of the entire town. They ducked into a derelict warehouse, sliding into the shadows as the roar of motorcycle engines filled the streets behind them. The bikers fanning out, their shouts slicing through the night like blades, orders barked into radios, boots pounding against cracked concrete. Bear pressed close to Jessie's side, every fiber of his body straining, ready to defend her with his life if it came to that. Clara leaned against a rusted support beam, gasping for air, her weapon still clutched tightly in her hands, her sharp eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. They needed to think, to plan, but the pounding in Jessie's head made it almost impossible. The realization gnawed at her relentlessly. Harold was playing a bigger game than she had imagined, one that involved not just lies and betrayal, but a deep rot eating away at the very institutions she had trusted. They couldn't hide forever. They needed to strike back, but before they could act, their enemies made their next move. Even as Jessie and Clara crouched in the darkness, a new wave of chaos exploded miles away at the Crestwood Police Department. Disguised as a frantic civilian, the injured biker stumbled through the front doors, blood smeared across his jacket, a convincing gash torn into his forehead. He collapsed into the arms of the young desk sergeant, gasping out a panicked story about an armed gang chasing him, threatening his life. The station, already on edge after whispers of violence spreading through town, erupted into organized confusion. Officers scrambled, some heading for the exits to check the perimeter, others ushering the biker into an interview room, calling for backup, stretching the already thin line of security dangerously taut. Hidden beneath his slumped posture and trembling hands, the biker's eyes gleamed with cold calculation. He had no interest in pressing charges. His real objective lay deep in the evidence vault, buried under lock and key. Backup copies of Jessie's report, fragments of surveillance footage, the last physical links tying him and Harrow to the staged crash. With the chaos thickening, the biker slipped free of his escort, ducking down the main hallway, his stolen badge flashing just long enough to fool the harried officers too distracted to scrutinize properly. In minutes, he was inside the evidence room, bypassing the basic keypad with a stolen code Harrow had given him. He rifled through the shelves with frantic precision, tossing aside files and flash drives until he found the designated locker. He cracked it open with trembling hands and froze. The evidence wasn't there. Panic flared hot and fast through him. He spun around and found himself staring straight into the calm, unblinking eyes of Bear. Jessie's canine somehow there, somehow waiting, every hair on his back standing straight up, lips curling into a silent snarl. Bear launched himself forward, a blur of muscle and fury. The biker barely had time to react before Bear slammed into him, knocking the stolen badge from his hand, sending the man crashing hard into a rack of shelving with a deafening clatter. Officers rounded the corner at the noise, weapons drawn, faces shifting from confusion to horror as they took in the scene. A wanted suspect mid-brighter, but by the sheer, unstoppable will of a dog who refused to let his family fall. Meanwhile, Jessie and Clara, moving fast through the empty back streets, were unaware of the new battle playing out at the station. Jessie's burner phone buzzed in her pocket, a curt message blinking across the cracked screen from an unknown number. "The evidence room is compromised. Move, now." Fear twisted into a dagger inside her chest, but Clara grabbed her shoulder firmly, steadying her. "We keep moving," Clara said. "You trust Bear?" Jessie nodded, forcing her legs to keep going even though every muscle screamed for rest. They ducked behind a row of abandoned vehicles, crouching low as two bikers prowled past, their engines muted but still menacing. Bear had always been the heart of their team, but now he was something more than a wild card Harrow hadn't accounted for. A living weapon forged in loyalty and fire. At the station, the biker struggled beneath Bear's weight, managing to pull a knife from his boot, slashing wildly. Bear yelped as the blade grazed his shoulder but didn't retreat. He bit down on the biker's wrist, a brutal, unrelenting grip, forcing the weapon free, holding the man in place until two officers tackled him from behind. They cuffed the biker roughly, dragging him away as Bear limped slightly, blood matting the fur on his leg but fire still burning in his eye. The desk sergeant, pale and shaken, knelt beside Bear, murmuring soothing words as he checked the injury. Bear licked the man's hand once, a silent acknowledgement, then pulled away, sniffing the air, searching, hunting. He found it tucked behind a loose panel near the back of the evidence room. A slim hard drive labeled in Jesse's tight handwriting, the last surviving copy of the video they had fought so hard to protect. Bear nosed it free, careful even with his injured leg, barking once to call attention. The sergeant scooped it up, cradling it as if it were the most fragile, precious thing in the world. His hands shaking. "Get this to Deputy Chief Morales," he barked at the nearest officer. "Now." Back in the warehouse district, Jesse and Clara crept toward a battered Ford pickup parked half-hidden beneath a collapsed awning. Clara popped the lock easily, sliding behind the wheel while Jesse vaulted into the passenger seat, Bear squeezing into the back with a grunt. The engine coughed to life, belching smoke. But it moved, and that was all they needed. Clara gunned it down the narrow service road, tires screaming against the broken asphalt. Jessie pulled out her phone again, punching in a secure line number she hadn't used since her academy days. After 3 agonizing rings, a gruff voice answered. "Morales," it said. Jessie didn't waste time. "You have to listen. Harrow is dirty. We have proof." Bear secured the evidence at the station. "We're en route." A beat of silence on the other end. Then Morales, sharp and steady, said, "Understood, get here now." Jessie hung up, adrenaline surging again as Clara floored the gas pedal. Behind them, the dark outlines of motorcycles crested the hill. Headlights slicing through the night. Jessie clenched the backpack tighter, feeling Bear's steady breath on her shoulder. They had survived this long, they weren't about to quit now. Ahead, the highway stretched open and empty beneath the stars. A fragile thread of hope pulling them toward salvation. But behind them, death was still coming, and this time, it wasn't planning to miss. The battered Ford truck roared down the highway with Jessie gripping the edge of her seat. Clara hunched low over the wheel, Bear wedged between them, every muscle in his massive body taut as a drawn bow. The night stretching endlessly before them while the pack of bikers closed the distance from behind, their engines screaming vengeance into the wind. Clara jerked the wheel sharply, sending the truck hurtling down a deserted exit ramp, tires screeching against cracked asphalt. Jessie clutching the backpack tighter against her chest, the precious microcamera still tucked safely inside, the only leverage they had left against Harrow and the nightmare he commanded. The city lights of Crestwood shimmered ahead, like a mirage, cold and indifferent. And Jessie prayed that Morales was ready, prayed that someone inside that rotten system still believed in the truth. They screeched into the back lot of the Crestwood Police Department, the old truck coughing one final protest before dying completely. Clara was out first, gun drawn, scanning the shadows. Jessie followed with Bear at her heels, the backpack slung over her shoulder, every instinct screaming that this was the most dangerous moment yet. They pushed through the side entrance Morales had directed them to, barreling down sterile hallways until they reached the operations room, where Morales, a grizzled veteran with sharp eyes and a weary posture, stood flanked by 2 trusted deputies. Jessie didn't waste a second. She slammed the backpack onto the table, unzipping it and producing the microcamera and the hard drive Bear had rescued. Morales listened silently as Clara relayed everything: Harrow's betrayal, the staged accident, the attack on the firehouse, the ambush at the depot. His face darkened with every word, jaw clenching so tightly Jessie feared it might shatter. When Clara finished, Morales picked up the hard drive as if it weighed 1,000 pounds. Nodding once, "You did good," he said quietly. "Let's finish this." Morales ordered the evidence processed immediately, assigning 2 deputies he trusted to handle it directly. Jessie sagged into a chair, exhaustion crashing over her, but she refused to relax completely, her gaze darting to every door, every shadow. She didn't trust the walls here anymore, didn't trust the uniforms moving through the station's halls with familiar ease. She was right to be wary. Even as Morales coordinated the investigation, far from their sight, Lieutenant Harrow moved quietly through the records room, his face composed, his badge flashing to whoever dared question him. In his hands was a single folder, the initial report Jessie had filed, the foundational document that tied her to the crash, the evidence Bear's heroics had kept from total destruction. With mechanical efficiency, Harrow slid the folder into a shredder, watching impassively as the paper dissolved into meaningless ribbons. He moved next to the digital archives, inputting a backdoor code, initiating a purge protocol hidden deep within the system's architecture. Within minutes, critical case files vanished from existence, overwritten, lost forever. Back in the operations room, Clara's laptop chirped a warning. Jessie shot up, heart lurching. Clara's fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling up the logs. "Someone's wiping files," she said, voice tight, "right now from inside the building." Morales swore under his breath, grabbing his radio. "Lock down the station," he barked. "Nobody leaves, nobody touches anything without my say-so." But it was too late. By the time the order echoed through the halls, Harrow was already slipping out the side exit, his face calm, his uniform impeccable, another badge in his pocket, one he had earned the hard way, through betrayal and blood. Jessie stood frozen, rage and helplessness warring inside her. They had the camera, yes, but Harrow had gutted the paper trail, making their evidence harder to present, easier to challenge, and far more dangerous to rely on alone. Clara touched her shoulder lightly, grounding her. "We still have the footage," she said. "It's not over." But Jessie knew how courts worked, how optics and politics twisted even the clearest truth. Harrow wasn't planning to run. He was planning to fight, to spin this into something else entirely, to paint them as rogue operatives, unstable, unreliable. And unless they found more, unless they had someone who could stand in front of a judge and say, "I saw it, I lived it," they were still in danger of losing everything. Fate, however, wasn't finished with Harrow yet. As Morales was setting up a secure review session for the microcamera footage, a soft knock came at the station's side door, a timid sound almost lost in the chaos. One of the younger deputies cracked it open and froze, eyebrows shooting up in disbelief. Standing there was a man Jessie didn't recognize at first, hunched over in a ratty hoodie, face bruised and gaunt, one hand clutching a manila envelope like it was a lifeline. Bear growled low in his throat, but not aggressively, almost like he recognized the scent of fear, of desperation. The man spoke in a hoarse, broken voice. "I need to talk to whoever's in charge," he rasped. "It's about Harrow and the biker." Morales strode to the door, pulling it wide. "You'd better come in," he said grimly. The man was ushered into the operations room, where he sagged into a chair as if the act of standing had been almost too much. Jessie crouched nearby, studying him. He looked battered, worn down by life, but his eyes burned with a kind of raw fury she understood all too well. "Your name's Noah Blake," he said after a moment, voice steadier now. "A year ago, my brother was killed. They said it was a hit and run. They said there wasn't enough evidence to charge anyone." He paused, swallowing hard. "I knew it was them. That biker you're after, Harold covered it up, paid off witnesses, threatened me to keep my mouth shut." Jessie leaned in, heart hammering. "Why come forward now?" Noah looked at her, something like hope flickering in his battered gaze. "Because I have proof." He lifted the envelope with trembling hands, spilling its contents onto the table. Grainy surveillance photos, a thumb drive labeled July 18th Midnight Deal. He pointed at the drive. "That's them, meeting behind the station. Harrow, the biker, a couple others. Talking about the payout, about making sure no one could tie it back to them." Clara grabbed the drive and plugged it into her laptop, the screen flashing with a series of still frames, timestamps matching the night Noah's brother died. The footage wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Enough to show Harrow's face. Enough to show the biker accepting a fat envelope stuffed with cash. Enough to destroy the web of lies that had protected them for so long. Jessie exhaled shakily, a tidal wave of emotions crashing through her. Anger, Grief, relief, they had him now. Harold couldn't shred or erase this. Not when a living, breathing witness stood ready to testify. Not when the footage bore silent, irrefutable witness to his crimes. Morales clapped Noah on the shoulder, his voice rough with emotion. "You're safe now," he promised. "We're going to bring him down." Jessie watched the room spin into motion around her. Deputies moving with purpose, Clara compiling the evidence, Morales barking orders to prepare for a coordinated arrest. Bear sat at her side, his body finally relaxing, his deep brown eyes shining with a fierce light. But Jessie knew it wasn't over. Not yet, not with Harrow still free somewhere out there, desperate and dangerous. Knowing the walls were closing in, and as they made final preparations to strike, Jessie felt it deep in her bones. The real fight was about to begin. The days that followed blurred into a frenzy of motion, Jessie, Clara, and Noah working tirelessly with Morales and his trusted circle to prepare the case. Bear never leaving Jessie's side, moving like her shadow, his body still bandaged from the scuffle at the station but his spirit as fierce as ever. The footage from the microcamera and Noah's thumb drive formed the backbone of the prosecution. Irrefutable and damning, the once invisible web of corruption Harrow had spun unraveling thread by thread under the relentless light of truth. The district attorney, a stern woman named Rachel Donovan with a reputation for fearing no one, took the evidence in hand and built an airtight case, filing charges against Harrow, the biker, and several other conspiracies in record time. Jessie sat in the courtroom weeks later, the wood-paneled walls heavy with history and expectation. Bear sprawled at her feet, his head resting on his paws but his eyes alert, the tension in the room so thick it felt like breathing soup. The trial was unlike anything Crestwood had ever seen. The public galleries packed with townsfolk, reporters, and off-duty officers, all craning their necks to catch a glimpse of the spectacle. Harrow sat stiffly at the defense table, his once proud uniform exchanged for a cheap gray suit, his face tight with barely concealed rage as Donovan outlined the charges against him. Conspiracy, evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, accessory to multiple assaults. A list so long that even the judge's face tightened in disbelief. Kara sat at Jessie's side, every muscle taut, while Morales stood stoically near the prosecution table, his presence a silent promise that corruption would no longer rule Crestwood unchecked. The highlight of the trial came when Donovan, with a masterful flourish, introduced the footage from the microcamera, the courtroom lights dimming as the screen lit up with grainy but unmistakable images. Harrow's face, the secret meeting, the cash exchange, the cold plotting of the staged accident that had nearly cost Jessie and Bear their lives. The jury watched in stunned silence, the weight of the betrayal etched onto every face. Harrow's lawyer tried to object, tried to spin wild theories of entrapment and misunderstanding, but it was no use. The truth was laid bare in brutal, unforgiving clarity. Then Noah took the stand, his voice shaking but steady, recounting the threats, the cover-ups, the pain of losing his brother and being silenced for so long. By the time Donovan finished her closing arguments, even the most cynical observers knew the verdict was inevitable. Jessie held her breath as the jury foreman rose, the folded paper in his hand shaking slightly. "Guilty," the foreman intoned, each word striking the air like a hammer. "Guilty on all counts." The courtroom erupted into a chaos of emotions. Shouts of outrage, cries of vindication, reporters scrambling to get statements. Jessie slumped back in her chair, tears pricking her eyes, a tidal wave of relief washing over her so forcefully she thought she might drown in it. Bear licked her hand once, a soft rumble vibrating in his chest, a warrior's acknowledgement of a battle won. Morales clapped her on the back, a rare smile breaking through his gruff exterior. "You did it, kid," he said. "You brought him down." The celebration that followed spilled out into the town square, people flooding the streets, cheering, hugging, a community exercising years of fear and anger in one cathartic explosion. Jessie and Bear stood quietly at the edge of it all, watching, absorbing, healing. Then, to her astonishment, the mayor herself climbed onto the courthouse steps, microphone in hand, her voice trembling with emotion as she called Jessie and Bear forward. The crowd parted, clapping and shouting their names, lifting Jessie along like a wave. "Today," the mayor said, "we honor true heroes. Jesse Caldwell, whose courage and determination refused to let evil win, and Bear, a warrior in his own right, whose loyalty and bravery remind us all what it means to fight for what is right. The mayor knelt and fastened a gleaming gold medal onto Bear's collar, the engraving reading, "For valor beyond duty." Jesse's vision blurred with tears she didn't bother wiping away. Bear sat proudly, tail thumping once against the marble steps, his chest swelling as the crowd erupted in applause. But even as the ceremony wound down and people drifted away, Jesse knew Bear's journey wasn't over. Later, in Morales's office, the veteran cop offered her a new badge, not just for herself, but for Bear as well. "You want you both," Morales said. "Officially. Not just as a firefighter and her dog. We need officers like you, people who see through the lies, who stand their ground." Jesse looked down at Bear, who met her gaze steadily, as if already knowing her answer. She smiled and accepted the badge, fastening Bear's special canine tag onto his collar with shaking fingers. Bear barked once, sharp and clear, their work wasn't finished, it was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, Jesse and Bear took on a new role within the Crestwood Police Department. Special Investigations. Assigned to cases too dangerous, too complex, too politically fraught for the average officer. Together they hunted the remnants of the network Harrow had protected, dismantling it piece by piece. Every mission was a test of their bond, their courage, but Bear never faltered. Neither did Jesse. They became a legend in Crestwood, a symbol of resistance, of hope, and late at night when Jesse sat on her porch, Bear's head resting on her knee, she would look up at the stars and feel something she hadn't felt in a long, long time. Freedom. Because in the end, it wasn't just about justice or revenge. It was about finding the light again in a world that had once seemed so full of shadows. And thanks to Bear, if this story moved you even half as much as it moved us to write it, don't forget to like the post and subscribe for more powerful stories about loyalty, courage, and the unbreakable bond between humans and their companions. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Which moment hit you the hardest? Was it when Bear found the hidden camera? Or when the courtroom finally echoed with justice? Drop a comment below and tell us what you felt. Also, let me know where you're watching from. It's always amazing to see how far these stories can travel. Thanks for being part of this journey. See you in the next story.